Well, I'm not going to invite Alex to sing what he was just singing. As you know, he likes music of the darker variety.
It's this horror punk misfits.
Yeah.
They write about that. I mean, that song is pretty bad, but it's still catchy.
Well,
the song "Last Caress" by the Misfits. If you want to listen to it.
If you want to,
Metallica covered it too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. When in the 80s. But.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there you go. If you're interested in, that
horrible, hateful lyrics.
Yes, horrible, hateful lyrics. Then there's a little something for you. Actually, so how does that fit into what I was going to bring up for today?
I have no clue either.
What you
want to talk about?
It's a surprise. Okay. So I was thinking, I've been doing a lot of different types of reading and listening. I'm reading something about Akashic Records. I'm kind of diving deep into that right now. And I've been listening to the podcast Next Level Soul with Alex Ferrari. I've been listening to that for a couple months and pretty exclusively the last couple weeks. I mean, I try to listen to some other things, but I'm just not pulled to them as much as which is kind of surprising because, Armchair Expert was the top spot for a long time. But my friend Linda told me about Next Level Soul, oh gosh, 6 months ago maybe. And it's pretty good. And so with that, leaning into a few other things with Akashic Records, trying to figure out some other things to do at the center, lots of meditation. I'm really being pulled to talk about consciousness today. So that's the thing that kind of came up for me. So when I say consciousness, what do you think?
I guess what came to mind was a spiritual awakening for me. Or maybe just or maybe a different perspective of things, more aware. Maybe things have a deeper meaning. It's not just going through the motions. Maybe, maybe there's more purpose and more meaning. Like I said, you have that awakening about something. And you said you had an experience the other morning when you were reading about the Akashic Record and you felt overcome. Is that would you describe that feeling you had as opening of consciousness or or awakening, or what does that apply to consciousness, that experience that you had the other morning? Or
I would say that was really an interesting experience. And I can tell the story here in a minute, but just to answer your question, I would say that was a shift in consciousness.
Okay.
Right? And some of the things that you were talking about, being aware and being present and changing perspective, I think of that as conscious living.
Yeah.
Or shifting in consciousness. So consciousness, I kind of what you were saying, when I think of the word consciousness as awareness.
Yeah. Or it's almost I'm kind of thinking of it when you finally surrendered or something. It's there's something that's bothering you in your life, and you're going throughout your day or weeks or months or years, and you just it bugs you, and you're I need to do something about this, but you can't. And then all of a sudden you have the ability to change that behavior or to move on from it. To me, that kind of seems like a form of consciousness as well. Maybe not, but I don't know.
Yeah, an evolution of consciousness.
Yeah.
Shift in consciousness. I guess when I think of consciousness in general, I think of, something that's sedentary, right? That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have any, or like let's say a pillow. Does a pillow have consciousness?
Mm.
I mean,
No.
I don't
I
know, but
don't
I'm
know.
guessing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing no.
Mm-hmm.
Not understanding all about the pillow.
Maybe in a parallel
Maybe
universe.
in a parallel universe. Who would know? But then animals are conscious. I would say plants
Our,
are conscious.
mm,
That's I think a controversial thing. Some people
yeah.
think plants are conscious. Some people do not. Um, so I think there are different ways to speak about consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But the things that we are doing every day and the things that we talk about is kind of that elevation of consciousness,
Yeah.
the evolution of consciousness, going from, not being aware of how your actions might be affecting yourself or others,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden becoming aware of how they're affecting yourself and others. And then once you have that awareness, you can't go back,
Yeah.
right? You can't say that didn't happen.
Well, and I think that's kind of like thinking about it now. And I think the term consciousness, I'd have to go through the 12 steps, is mentioned in the 12 steps. But I think that's the whole point of working through the steps, is it does create that consciousness. And then you're aware of your actions, the things, you're aware of what makes you you, what's the character defects, the people you've hurt. And then once you have that consciousness, it enables you to change, and it also enables you to build a spiritual relationship. I think that's the whole point of the 12 steps, is to bring you to consciousness and then, expand upon it, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you just said that, and I'm kind of blown away because that is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean,
And I guess I didn't understand that. I guess I didn't. I mean, like, we've talked about the steps. I don't know that we've talked about them necessarily in order. But the way you just described the program in general, it's just like,
but really, that's when I think about it, that's what it does, because you come in defeated, and you just like, you're oblivious, and you don't, your life is a mess. But then as you work through the steps, you kind of like peel back those layers, and you admit defeat, and then you ask for help, and then you kind of look at yourself, and it brings a whole new outlook and awareness and consciousness to yourself. And that's why they say like AA ruins your drinking, because it does. Like if you actually work through the steps and change, and then you relapse and drink again, it's not the same, because you've changed your consciousness.
right, you're aware
Yeah,
of this.
so
And so if you're doing it again, you're making that conscious
yeah.
decision, and that could just make you feel worse,
Well,
probably,
yeah,
right?
you feel guilty the whole time. It's like, and I relapsed a few times back in the day, and it does, once you have that awareness and that consciousness, and know the right way of living, I guess you could say, or a better way of living. Once you revert back to drinking, every time you pick up that drink, that's all you can think about, is how I know this isn't the answer. But then, the malady of alcoholism makes sure you keep drinking, but you're almost doing it filled with guilt the whole time.
Yeah.
So it really does ruin any kind of small relief you got from alcohol. AA ruins pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's
Wow, that was. Can you restate that, what you said the
what
first time?
about
Like it kind of elevates your consciousness, like you start
working through the
working
steps.
through the steps.
Just like, well, yeah, I mean, you come in like beat down,
Yeah.
and you at bottom, you don't know what to do, but then you want to change. You admit defeat. You surrender, and then you ask for help, and then you do like soul searching, figure out your defects of character as well as the good things, figure out who you hurt, and you try to correct those things, try to make amends, and then by that point you have, most of the time it does open up that level of consciousness. It changes you to where you can start to build a spiritual relationship. Because then in steps like 10 and 11 is really when you start to get into the daily reflection and the meditation. And then, step 12 is about, carrying the message and continuing that spiritual relationship. So,
and when you talk about spiritual relationship, the spiritual relationship with,
no, they'll say higher power, whatever.
Higher power.
Yeah, it could be, that whole, that's debatable. When I first came in, I felt like, and they say, oh, it doesn't need to be God, but it needs to be a power greater than you. But then there's groups that are agnostic and atheists. And, I think it can work that way too.
Yeah, because I mean, a higher power could be love.
Well, yeah, they say it can be the group, it can be love, it can be, I think it would be hard if you believe in absolutely nothing. I think that's harder to just like turn things over. But I can see how agnostics and atheists can still use spiritual principles.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess some people might turn to nature.
Yeah. I was just thinking like the awe of a sunset.
Yeah.
Or a sunrise. Or seeing the mountains or the beach or the water. Which sidebar, the water. I don't know if I like drowned in another life or something, but whenever I get around like the ocean, it's just feels so intense and scary to me.
Well, maybe there is something there.
Yeah.
And it's probably the same thing with, you got the 12 steps of principles, which was taken from other, they're not original. They form those off of like other religious groups. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, it's the 12 steps aren't unique. They put them together based off of other religions or groups or whatever. Kind of like what you might be doing at the center, or what a person might be doing in counseling or whatever. I think it's kind of similar. You don't realize you're going through that method, but if you go somewhere, if you go to counseling, or if you come to someone for coaching, or you're already kind of admitting that there's a problem, and then working with someone, you're kind of like bringing that stuff out.
Yeah.
And then, it seems like whenever you do, when there's action involved to like get to the core or to improve yourself, if there's action that's being taken, it seems like it changes you, as long as it's genuine.
Yeah.
And that change is, new like consciousness or elevated consciousness, or awakening or enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. But I don't know if they're interchangeable, but they're pretty similar.
Just what you said earlier about, how you first communicated that about the program. It's really powerful. And I hope that people who are listening really felt that as well. I'm sure they will, and understand the program maybe from a different way. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Is it true that, I don't know, I know there's a Bob. Is there a Bill and a Bob?
Yeah.
Okay. That like maybe, let's say Bob had a dream or an inspiration or something that inspired the 12 steps or inspired the program or something?
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
it's been forever since, to try to revisit the history, but it was Bill, and actually it was his friend Ebby. Ebby had gone sober and came and talked to Bill. And I think Ebby had gone sober. I don't know if it was it wasn't the Washingtonian groups, but it was some kind of religious group that used like those types of spiritual principles. But the problem with it was like a religious group. It wasn't,
Yeah.
And Ebby, he knew that in order for him to like stay sober, he needed to carry the message. And he went to Bill and tried to get Bill sober. And Bill ended up having a spiritual awakening in the hospital, I think, or spiritual experience, and that I think is what enabled him to get sober. But he didn't stay sober. So really, Ebby and Bill were like the first two, but then Ebby didn't stay sober. Bill stayed sober, and when he was in Akron, Ohio on a business trip, he was about ready to drink and knew he needed to find a drunk to like try to help. So he looked in the church directory and said, "Hey, I need like the worst drunk in your congregation." They said, "Well, we got Dr. Bob."
Dr. Bob.
Yeah, he was a proctologist.
Okie dokie.
So, he actually, I think, the Firestone, they met at the Firestone estate in one of the like little buildings there on the property. And then he carried the message to Bob, and Bob didn't get sober immediately, I don't think, but that was kind of like the birthplace of AA, because then eventually Bob did get sober, and they started the first group in Akron. But they pulled together, like, the steps are pulled together from all different kinds of, I don't know if you say religious stuff, or, they're pulled together from a couple different things.
Well, they're situated in a way that can really be beneficial for people, which is really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that. I love that story. Thank you for sharing that and more about the program and the way that you did.
Yeah. We got off track. Yeah.
No, I think it's perfect. And there might be a lot of people who know or are struggling themselves to kind of evolve in a way or away from, an addiction, such as alcohol or something else.
It's hard. And if it wasn't for AA, I wouldn't. And that's the thing. I don't go now. We drove by my old home group last night, and I seen a guy up there. At this point in my life, it's like I don't feel like I need that. I don't know. I know. But yeah, if it wasn't for the program and all that stuff, I wouldn't be where I'm at. It's important. And some people might stay in it their whole life. Others, like me, I thought I would always go, and then I just stopped going.
But it's always there.
Yeah, it is.
If it's something that you feel like you need to go back to or want to touch in with, it's always there.
Yeah.
And the principles are the same. Yeah. Those haven't changed.
Last year I had a guy reach out and say, "I'm trying to get the people that help me get sober lead I'm chairing this month," and he asked me, and I'm like, "Man, I've been so far removed. I don't." But I was also recovering from the neck surgery, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's another guy that has asked you to support his students as they're in the drug and alcohol recovery program. Like, they're studying to support people in drug and alcohol recovery. Is that right?
Who?
The guy that you do Zooms with?
Oh, yeah, my friend. Josh. We met through gaming. We played Destiny for and a group of us became really close. But Josh and I, he's down in North Carolina, and he was going through alcohol and drug treatment, like to be a teacher, counselor. And now he teaches, so he knows my story because we used to talk all the time, when we play games. So a couple times a year he'll ask me to talk to his students, because these are people that are wanting to be drug and alcohol counselors. So it kind of gives them an idea of someone who's been in recovery and what it's like. And so, yeah.
And that's a great way to stay close to your story too.
Yeah, for sure.
Stay connected to it.
Yeah.
When talking about consciousness and shifting consciousness, I think we all kind of have these little, whether or not we have had big shifts in consciousness, which I'm guessing that a lot of the people or many people who are listening to this have had some of those experiences. When, kind of larger shifts in consciousness or perspective. But one way that I really enjoy shifting my consciousness or elevating my consciousness is through meditation. And I know we've talked about that before, but that's a way that has, I know that a couple years ago, that was not a couple years ago, several years ago, almost probably 10 years ago, when I started meditating consistently, that just really elevated my consciousness in a way that was just really powerful. It allowed me to open up to different perspectives, having these experiences where there were these unfoldings, whether they were unfoldings of, metaphysics or unfoldings of just general situations that I was going through. I really had some powerful experiences there. And I know a lot of people have had some powerful experiences in that too. Breath work was another one that I was telling this story not too long ago. Do you know this story?
Oh, where you like got stuck?
Yeah.
Like paralyzed
oh my gosh. So yeah, I was doing this breath work practice. I was working with a coach, and she sent this breath work practice to me, and she's like, do this breath work. I was like, okay. It was right before I was going into Reiki 1 training. And so I was like, oh, this seems like a good time to do it, Sidebar, when you're going in to do some training like Reiki or, some other kind of energetic, program, it's really interesting. Like the week before you go into those trainings, something crazy always happens. Okay? I don't know why. I don't know how. And that's actually how I start my Reiki classes. Like, so, how was your last week? Did anything weird happen?
Bird laying on your shoulder?
There's always something. And so I did this breath work. Kyle was like 5, and he was asleep. So I'm like, oh, I'll just do this, So I started doing this breath work. It was kind of an intense breath work. It was, I can't really explain it, but it was intense. And it got me into this, physically, I was in a different state. Like I was my arms were vibrating, I was lightheaded, it was a different state. And then all of a sudden, my hands were like claws, right? Like lobster claws. And I could not move them. I couldn't move them. I was stuck, literally stuck. And if I closed my eyes, I was just, in my mind's eye, it was just this, it just looked like outer space, It was great. I was like freaking out and going with it at the same time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Have you ever been in that situation where you're like, this feels really weird, but I'm just going to see what happens?
I don't think so. No.
So, and then I got kind of, and it felt like energy was just coming out of my hands, just shooting out of my hand. It was the weirdest experience that I have ever had, to this day. And it started making me nervous because I started thinking, like, my anxiety kicked in.
What if I'm stuck like this?
What if I'm stuck like this? What if Kyle wakes up and he needs me and I can't do anything, And then I just heard my breath got me into it. My breath can get me out of it. So I just started breathing. I changed my breath. And it all kind of came down. And I was able to not have lobster claws anymore. But I looked it up.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that something that can happen
Yes.
when you reach a certain point of meditation? What is it?
It can happen during breath work. And I haven't looked it up in a long time. But it's something that can happen during breath work. Yeah. I think a specific kind of breath work.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So. It was, it was interesting.
Well,
yes.
You think about these Buddhist monks who set themselves on fire, like, and not move, like, it almost sounds like you can get yourself in a state like that where, by meditating or breathing. Or,
so the story that you were talking about earlier was this book. So I've been, interested in learning more about the Akashic Records.
Well, what is that? Because I didn't know what it was. We watched the thing on the History Channel that was talking about it.
Ancient aliens.
Yeah, ancient aliens.
Ancient aliens.
And,
It's okay. We can talk about it.
And at first I wasn't buying it, but then it made sense where what it's saying is that there's like certain codes that are at certain times that have been sent out that make people more intelligent, or like they give them the schematics to like do this, or like how would you describe it?
Well, the Akashic Records is like the book of everything, the book of life, right? So it's everything that it's like, think of it as like a library in the cosmos where all the information, all the knowledge that's ever been created exists.
Yeah.
Or ever will be created exists. So pretty low-key stuff. On that show, they were talking a lot about Edgar Cayce, which they called him the sleeping prophet.
Well, this is the one you watched the other day, right? I'm talking about the one we watched like a year or two ago.
Oh.
Where it was talking about like, you know, at certain times in the 18th, 19th, 20th century, like across the world, certain people would get the same idea to like create like the television or the car. But it, you know, it's at first I wasn't buying it, but the fact that like people across the globe would have the same idea at the same time. And what they said that was like the Akashic Record kind of being like funneled through to people to help advance technology.
Yeah, information being
kind
connected.
Of like right. And that kind of made sense to me, because it's like, how do these major technology breakthroughs like
happen,
reach people, different people at the same time across the globe? So that's what I was referring to.
Okay.
But
yeah, I mean, so a lot of times the inspiration that we are receiving, so let's say you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I this would be a cool idea to invent, right? Other people might be getting that same inspiration. And that is, you know, that is like call it it's like an intuitive hit.
Yeah.
Essentially.
But it's coming from the Akashic Record, correct? Or is that something else?
Well, I mean, it could be coming from like a guide, like connecting you with that experience, connecting you with that intuition.
Maybe I was getting two things confused. But...
Yeah, because the Akashic Records, you can tap into the Akashic Records, right? So that can happen. So perhaps that person was tapping into the Akashic Records, or it was something that it was an inspiration that was being sent, right? Like an intuitive hit, or connecting somebody with this intuitive experience.
Maybe that's what they were saying in the episode, was like, it could be the Akashic Record, it could be a signal being sent out. Yeah. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I'm learning about the Akashic Records. It's not my impression is not that things are sent from the Akashic Records.
They're just there.
They're there. You can tap into them.
Okay.
You know, and that could be maybe what, you know, these people are doing. Unknowingly,
or something's being unlocked within it, and certain people can pick it up.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Or their guides or higher self or something is offering them that inspiration. So you think about it, there might be lots of people, like you were just saying, lots of people might get a hit, if you will, to create something or do something, but maybe not everybody's going to do it.
Yeah.
Or maybe a couple people will do it, but not all the people that get the information. So, but that is definitely a way that our consciousness and just our humanity evolves.
What is interesting that, because I'm sure some people like something new comes out and someone's probably like, I was just thinking of that 6 months ago. Or so it's interesting that these ideas or things are created that are complex, but people, like I said, people across the world all have the same idea. It's too coincidental for me. to think that, oh, people just randomly had this amazing technology breakthrough idea at the same time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's something else. There's something else involved.
It's
right.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk about this in more detail in a future episode. And there are different types of intuition, right? Clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, what did I say? Clairaudience? Clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance. Those are the main four. And those are different ways for your intuition to kind of speak to you. So clairvoyance, clear seeing, clairaudience, clear hearing, claircognizance or clear knowing, clairsentience, clear feeling. So those are all different ways to experience intuition. But if you think about, like, let's say an engineer or a designer, they're a lot of times get these, like, you can think of them as like downloads into their head, right? And they see it in their head and they put it on paper, right? So where are those ideas coming from? Now, that doesn't mean that they're not creating them on their own. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it's always an intuitive hit, but that connection of pulling those connections from lots of different things into one thing.
Yeah.
That's quite an experience.
So I interrupted you to explain the Akashic record, which in other words, it's just information stored in the cosmos.
Yeah, it's just the book of life. Yeah.
So what was your experience the other day?
With reading?
Yeah.
So I've been listening to this podcast about Akashic Records for about a year. And it's been really interesting to me. I like the way this woman explains it because she's very practical, and I like to, that's what I like to bring to the intuitive work I do, is practicality and everyday. Like I want to demystify spirituality, right? It is big, it's powerful, it's connective, it's all of that, but it's also very simple everyday stuff, kind of like what you were talking about.
It doesn't have to be searching for enlightenment, being a monk. You can, go ahead.
Yeah, and I like that about her, that she has that same kind of mentality. Akashic Records Reading, I think, is what her website and podcast is. And then, Next Level Soul, they're talking a lot about channelers and different things like that. And I don't know, I just started getting more interested, and it kept pulling me. And so Brandy at the center had this book, because I mentioned I'm thinking about taking a class or looking more
Akashic
into it.
Record connoisseur.
Yeah. And she had this book, and she brought it to me, and she said, I have not read it. I've had it, it's not like something I'm interested in right now, but if you want to read it, cool. So the other day I opened it and I started reading it, like from the preface to the acknowledgments. Like, I wasn't even like in the meat of the book, right? I opened it up and immediately my consciousness shifted. Totally shifted. And I could feel it in my head. I could feel it in my eyes. It almost felt like a channeling state in my eyes, which I had only experienced one other time before. That was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And my consciousness was completely shifted for like an hour and a half just from cracking this book open. It was, I don't even know what to say about it.
Yeah.
I guess that experience was like, okay, well, this book was meant for me.
Yeah.
Right? I should be reading this. I should be exploring this. Who knows what'll come out of it, but it's obviously, to me, it felt like this is obviously knowledge and information that
is important.
Well,
and then the funny thing was, I think that was Friday morning, because then Friday night, it was my first night off work, and you fell asleep, like, you and Kyle were watching Ancient Aliens. You fell asleep, and then Kyle and I were like doing stuff, and then you just happened to wake up to the episode that was talking about
Edgar Cayce and Akashic
yeah, I'm like, wasn't that a coincidence? Like, so then you stayed up and you watched it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really interesting for sure. You're like, well, I guess that's a sign for you.
Yeah, and I'm sure I've had those moments. To me, it sounds like almost like a moment of clarity, maybe a little bit different than that. But sometimes you just have those moments or those experiences where you're just like the stuff that you're fighting, you let go of, or you just get this like it's almost like in the cartoons where you see like a light bulb go off. So I don't think those experiences aren't. Some people might be listening like, that's crazy. You sure there wasn't a gas leak? Or but no, I don't. I think that throughout our lives, we have those pop up. Sometimes we don't even realize them.
Yeah.
Depending on how attuned you are, I guess.
Well, I was just thinking that. I mean, I'm definitely more sensitive energetically than the average person, I would say. So an experience that I might have, like you were saying, it might sound like a gas leak to somebody else. And it doesn't have to be that dramatic.
No.
At all. It is, and I wouldn't say, I don't have those experiences all the time, but I think that's a great way to explain it when you were like, it's just like a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
And that is just a shift in consciousness. That's a shift in perspective.
But you can even feel it, or you can tell, like, okay, I feel differently about this thing that I'm either thinking about or feeling indifferent about. It's like there's a sudden change, whether it be acceptance or knowledge or whatever.
Yeah, and probably everybody's experienced that on some level.
Yeah.
Let's say you're in a relationship that maybe isn't going the way that you want it to go,
and you just don't know,
and you're trying and trying and trying and trying to make it work and trying to fight against it. Then you maybe come to some realization, and it's like your whole body just changes.
Yeah. And I think
and you can't go back.
No, and probably once you get there, you're pretty much done, which not everyone gets to that. A lot of people stay wishy-washy in their feelings and emotions, but sometimes you do. You just get to that, and you're like, I know this is the path, this is the answer, this is whatever. And then, the outlook on that is different. But as far as consciousness, though, I think sometimes it's well, I guess making a conscious decision, but sometimes it is just making a decision. But that's the hardest thing to get to when you're you either don't want to let go of something or you're unsure. But when you finally decide to make that decision, I think that's like when there is a shift in the consciousness regarding whatever's going on. So
that's a great place to stop.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for going on this journey with me. He's like, I don't know what we're talking about, but okay.
Yeah, I'm down for whatever.
Yeah. I do want to, I think maybe in the next couple, I want to talk about, intuition from that perspective. Go down a little deeper there.
Yeah. There's a lot more stuff you're familiar with than I am, but you're talking about clairvoyance and clear Jupiter and clear
Jupiter.
I don't know. But that seems like something you really like, which I guess maybe some people have that gift, but I think if you're a little bit sensitive, you could work yourself to channel that stuff. I mean, some people might just have it naturally, but I feel
listen, it comes stock on all of us. Every single person is intuitive. We'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There's a little Easter egg for you. All right. Well, we'll see you guys.
See you.